Prosecutor did a 30-minute interview with CNN. You should link that. Wait, that would actually be... We'll definitely watch that if that's the case. Ooh, okay. That's super informative then. We'll definitely watch that. Anytime you can get direct access to people like Supreme Court justices or prosecutors or whatever that are working on cases, super interesting to listen to them. Okay.
Prosecutor Kareem Khan, welcome to the program.
There's big drama. We've got drama between international streamer ICC and domestic local gamer boy Benjamin Netanyahu, aka Bibi Palestinian child slayer XXX. We will be covering their beef today. Okay. What's your opinion on people wanting Netanyahu arrested and tried but completely ignoring the mass graves in Ukraine? Well, I think people want Putin arrested as well, right? But I mean, I don't know. Those people are obviously hypocrites. But don't ever let other people's hypocrisies... before we get into the ICC, we'll read it. Fuck, I'm still doing emails. 17 left. Before we get into the ICC stuff, okay? Don't let the hypocrisy and the stupidity of other people push you into stupid positions. Don't ever let that happen, okay? When you're digging through, when the ICC thing comes out, your thought shouldn't be like, is this going to validate or fight against the things that my political opponents have said, and is it going to reinforce or fight? That shouldn't be your thought, right? The thought is, well, the ICC is our international criminal individual investigating body, like investigates individuals. And then we'll just read and see what they have to say. We could disagree with them at the end. We could agree with them at the end. It could be that they have information that we don't have. It's possible as well. Like, you just don't know. You just have to read it, check it out, analyze it. Isn't the jurisdiction argument kind of sus? Could someone from Texas just apply for jurisdiction, claiming to be a representative of the sovereign Republic of Texas? I think that the more that I analyze legal stuff, the more that I look at legal stuff, surprisingly, the more it seems like most legal systems are actually kind of the same. So when you say, isn't the jurisdiction argument kind of sus? Could someone from Texas just apply for jurisdiction, claiming to be a representative of the sovereign Republic of Texas? So the ICC doesn't claim jurisdiction over Israel. The ICC only has jurisdiction on the states that are signatories to the ICC, or more specifically something called the Rome Statute, which is basically the big document that that details all the crimes the ICC can prosecute an individual for. So the ICC doesn't have jurisdiction in Israel, though they claim to have jurisdiction in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, because the Palestinians, I believe, have requested that much. So that means that the ICC could issue an arrest warrant, or could, I think, even do a full case and say, we actually think Netanyahu is guilty. However, the ICC can't extradite him from Israel because Israel's not a signatory to the Rome Statute. Now, if Netanyahu were to travel to a country that is a signatory to the Rome Statute, they could theoretically apprehend him and then ship him over to The Hague, which is in the Netherlands, which is where the ICC court is. The International Criminal Court is. Yeah, the ICC is. Now, when you say, wouldn't it be weird arguing about the jurisdiction? What if somebody from Texas could apply for jurisdiction, blah, blah, blah? People can kind of do that. So, for instance, in the United States of America, when Mueller was doing his investigation into Donald Trump to see if there was improper or prosecutable behavior between Trump's communications with Russia, one of the things that Mueller uncovered were a whole bunch of Russian operatives operating in the United States under fake names as U.S. entities when they were foreign entities that were undeclared. And in that case, the United States issued indictments for Russians. So we claim we have jurisdiction because, well, you're committing crimes in our state, in our country, in this case. So we are going to issue warrants for you. But now, realistically, the United States is going to get those Russians because they are, in Moscow. They're in Russia. So this does happen, where a state might issue an arrest warrant, or a country might issue an arrest warrant, or say, we think you're guilty of a crime, and then you can request extradition. Now, those agreements, I think, are going to be more complicated, but So I think this is kind of normal for how legal stuff goes. The ICC would have jurisdiction over Israel if the situation was referred by the UN Security Council. I don't believe that's true. I don't believe, and again, I could be wrong. If you can link me something showing me something otherwise, I'd be curious to see it. But I don't believe the ICC and the UN have anything to do with each other, basically. I don't think they have anything to do with each other. The prosecutor did a 30-minute interview with CNN. You should link that. Wait, that would actually be... We'll definitely watch that if that's the case.
Prosecutor Kareem.
Ooh, okay. That's super informative then. We'll definitely watch that. Anytime you can get direct access to people like Supreme Court justices or prosecutors or whatever that are working on cases, super interesting to listen to them. Okay. Wait, Article 15 of the Rome Statute allows the Security Council to give the ICC jurisdiction. Oh, okay. Hold on. Let's check that. Let's just read Article 13. This document, if you Google Rome statute, this is the Rome statute. This is going to give you, like when we go to Article 5, 6, and 7 and 8, these are your big when you talk about like genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes. Now, Article 6 genocide here, this is for charging individuals with genocide, not states. And this is in relationship to the crime of genocide, not in relation to not fulfilling your obligations under the Convention of Genocide Prevention. They're different things. It's kind of complicated or weird, but technically these are different things. There's also accompanying the Rome statute and this guide, you also have an, wait, did it say it down here? You also have another, this says elements of crimes. There's a separate thing you can look up, which is a whole book called Elements of Crimes. And this will give you more specific charging guidelines for, I think it's just Article 6 through 8. Yeah. Somebody said Article 13 gives the UN, hold on, let me check. Exercise of jurisdiction. The court may exercise its jurisdiction with respect to a crime referred to in Article 5 in accordance with the provisions of the statute if a situation in one or more of such crimes appears to have been committed is referred to the prosecutor by a state party in accordance with Article 14. A situation in which one or more of such crimes appear to have been committed is referred to the prosecutor by the Security Council acting under Chapter 7 of the Charter of the United Nations, or the prosecutor has initiated an investigation in respect of such a crime in accordance with Article 15. Oh, okay. So this means that states or the UN Security Council can refer things to the ICC. Okay. Makes sense. Today, I'm filing applications for warrants of arrest before Pre-Trial Chamber 1 of the International Criminal Court in the situation in the state of Palestine. Okay, so this is the official news release from the International Criminal Court. On the basis of evidence collected and examined by my office, I have reasonable grounds to believe that Yahya Sinwar, head of the Islamic resistance movement, Hamas, in the Gaza Strip, Mohammed Diab Ibrahim al-Masri, more commonly known as Daif, commander-in-chief of the military wing of Hamas, known as the Al-Qassam Brigades, and Ismail Haniyeh, head of Hamas Political Bureau, bear criminal responsibility for the following war crimes and crimes against humanity committed on the territory of Israel and the state of Palestine in the Gaza Strip from at least the 7th of October 2023. Now, to recenter, the International Criminal Court, when they make charges of crimes, these are always going to be focused on individuals. These are never about states and always about individuals. So the first charge here is we have extermination as a crime against humanity, contrary to Article 7, subsection 1b of the Rome Statute. Now, remember, when we're talking about the Rome Statute, you just have to Google Rome Statute. You're going to get this document from the ICC, and any particular crime that they reference here, we should be able to look up and see exactly what they're talking about. So we can go to Article 7. I won't do this for everyone, but just if you want to know any of these, this is how you would do this, right? So you would look at Article 7 right here, and then you would see they're referring to 7.1b of the Rome Statute. And so 7.1b means, for the purpose of this statute, crimes against humanity means any of the following acts when committed as part of a widespread or systematic attack directed against any civilian population with knowledge of the attack. So Article 7, subsection 1, subsection B would be extermination. And if you're curious about, oh, well, I would like a little bit more information, then you can Google Rome Statute elements of crimes, and then you'll come up with this book here. And this, for a few of the articles, 6, 7, and 8, is going to give you a specific breakdown of the elements that need to be met for this particular conviction to come through. It'd have to be proven, right? So for Article 7, we would see this, 7.1b. We can scroll and we can look at crimes against humanity of extermination elements. Now, when you're talking about a crime, an element is a necessary part of it, meaning, I believe, somebody correct me wrong, an element means that every single part of these needs to be met for the crime to be legitimate, right? So Article 7, subsection 1, subsection B, crime against humanity of extermination. These are the 4 elements for that crime. 1, the perpetrator killed one or more persons, including by inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about the destruction of part of a population. 2, the conduct constituted or took place as part of a mass killing of members of a civilian population. 3, the conduct was committed as part of a widespread or systematic attack directed against a civilian population. And 4, the perpetrator knew that the conduct was part of or intended the conduct to be part of a widespread or systematic attack directed against a civilian population. So keep in mind that when we're talking about crimes here from the International Criminal Court, there is a very strong, there is a required mens rea component to every single one of these crimes, meaning that the perpetrator knew that the conduct was a part of or intended to be a part of a particular thing. This means that for a criminal conviction in the International Criminal Court of Justice, the mens rea aspect is crucial and required to convict for that particular crime. This is one of the reasons why I read that paper, and other people have been critical of the Goldstone report, for instance. It gets brought up a lot, is because when the Goldstone report was recommending charges for crimes, they didn't engage in the mens rea analysis whatsoever. They were merely looking at what had happened on the ground, and they said, oh, well, if 10 people are killed, it's probably this war crime. That's not how war crimes work. And then remember what I've said before is if you blow up a building and 100 civilians die, 1,000 civilians die, that's not necessarily a war crime. You need the mens rea aspect of it. It is an element of the crime. You have to have the criminal state of mind to be convicted of a crime in the International Criminal Court. Okay? Okay. I won't go through every single one of these, but this just to give you an idea of like how these particular things work. So remember, for ICC, International Criminal Court, the Rome Statute lays out the crime. The Elements of Crime book will lay out the necessary elements to charge for a crime, and the International Criminal Court only charges individuals with crimes, not states. Okay. Okay. How strong is the legal burden of proof for the ICC? Is it beyond a reasonable doubt? Preponderance of evidence? My guess is going to be probable cause or something to bring an indictment is going to be my guess, which I believe an arrest is essentially an indictment, right? That'd be my guess, but I could be wrong. We could look up these things. It's not going to be beyond a reasonable doubt just to charge somebody with a crime, though, right? Murder as a crime against humanity, contrary to Article 7, subsection 1A, as a war crime, contrary to Article 8, 2CI. Taking hostages as a war crime, contrary to Article 8, 2C3. Rape and other acts of sexual violence as crimes against humanity, contrary to Article 7, 1G. And also as war crimes pursuant to Article 8 in the context of captivity. Torture as a crime against humanity, contrary to Article 7, and also as a war crime, contrary to Article 8. In the context of captivity, other inhumane acts as a crime against humanity, contrary to Article 7, in the context of captivity. Cruel treatment as a war crime, contrary to Article 8, in the context of captivity. And outrages upon personal dignity as a war crime, contrary to Article 8, in the context of captivity. So it looks like almost all of these charges, half of these are in relation to what happened on October 7th, and it seems like a lot of these other charges are in relation to treatment of hostages that have been held, essentially. Let me grab a sippy soy real quick. Hold on. My office submits that the war crimes alleged in these applications were committed in the context of an international armed conflict between Israel and Palestine and a non-international armed conflict between Israel and Hamas running in parallel. So remember, in the past, we've argued on this stream before, some people have come to me and they've said, oh no, this is obviously not an international armed conflict, or oh, this is obviously like an internal blah, blah, blah. None of these things are very clear cut. They generally are pretty easy to figure out, but the problem is, remember, Israel-Palestine is a very, very, very unique issue, and it's very difficult to sort out when you're having these conflicts. Well, do we treat this as like an international armed conflict? Do we treat this as like an occupied territory? Do we treat this as a policing issue? Do we treat this as is Hamas a non-state actor? However, my understanding is, for the most part, it doesn't really matter that much. that a lot of similar rules. Now, it's going to matter if you're policing a people versus being in a international versus non-international armed conflict, but most of the rules are about the same, I think, between international and non-international, like armed conflict. When you're in armed conflict with people, your obligations and everything are roughly the same. Keep in mind the controversial part of this isn't charges, but whether the ICC even has jurisdiction because of the necessary statehood element for signatories. I don't know if that's very controversial or not. I would imagine the ICC easily should be able to review these behaviors. That'd be my guess, but we'll see. Oh wait, shit, hold on. We submit that the crimes against humanity charged were part of a widespread and systematic attack against the civilian population of Israel by Hamas and other armed groups pursuant to organizational policies. Some of these crimes, in our assessment, continue to this day. If you want to play politics for a little bit, because my guess is going to be a lot of lefties are probably dancing and happy over the Netanyahu charges, which we'll get to. And the Minister of Defense, Gallant? Wait. Fuck. Yoav Gallant. Gallant or Gallant? But keep in mind here that we have the rape and sexual violence being used in a systematic way. And we've also got sexual violence used in... Oh, I'm sorry. They included both in here. You've got rape and other acts of sexual violence probably in October 7th, and then also as war crimes pursuant to Article 8(2)(e)(6) in the context of captivity. So against people on October 7th and against captives. So I don't know how many people are going to, but yeah. Okay. Some of these crimes in our assessment continue to this day. My office submits that there are reasonable grounds to believe that, okay, so reasonable suspicion, I guess, is the standard here for issuing an arrest. There are reasonable grounds to believe that Sinwar, Deif, and Hanea are criminally responsible for the killing of hundreds of Israeli civilians in attacks perpetrated by Hamas, in particular its military wing, the Al-Qassam Brigades, and other armed groups on the 7th of October, 2023, and the taking of at least 245 hostages. Okay, so this is in relation to... October 7th, and probably the hostages afterwards, right? As part of our investigations, my office has interviewed victims and survivors, including former hostages and eyewitnesses from 6 major attack locations: Kfar Aza, Holit, the location of the Supernova Music Festival, Be'eri, Nir Oz, and Nahal Oz. The investigation also relies on evidence such as CCTV footage, authenticated audio, photo, and video material, statements by Hamas members, including the alleged perpetrators named above, and expert evidence. It is the view of my office that the expert evidence one is very interesting. I'm curious what that means. Well, typically in U.S., I believe this is an international more or less thing. An expert witness is a witness who's qualified to come in and make statements on things that they're not witnessed, that they haven't witnessed, right? An expert witness is usually somebody whose qualifications allow them to make judgments about a thing that they haven't observed firsthand. So for instance, let's say that a wife gets really mad, kills her husband, goes to court, and she tries to claim temporary insanity. The defense for that might bring in a psychologist who's been familiar with people that have gone insane by killing people in the past or whatever. And even though he didn't directly witness the wife killing the husband, that expert witness might say, well, as somebody with a lot of experience here, I can say that this behavior would be expected, or it would be unreasonable to expect them to do blah, blah, blah. An expert witness. So when they say expert evidence here, I don't know if they just mean evidence provided to them by people, or if they mean they have like experts that they personally have had go through some of this evidence and make declarations on it. I'm not sure 100%. It's a random thing. In the view of my office, it is the view of my office that these individuals planned and instigated the commission of crimes on October 7th, 2023, and have, through their own actions, including personal visits to hostages shortly after their kidnapping, acknowledged their responsibility for those crimes. We submit that these crimes could not have been committed without their actions. They are charged both as co-perpetrators and as superiors pursuant to Article 25 and 28 of the Rome Statute. During my own visit to Kibbutz Be'eri and Kibbutz Kfar Aza, as well as to the site of Supernova Music Festival in Reem, I saw the devastating scenes of these attacks and the profound impact of the unconscionable crimes charged in the applications filed today. Speaking with supervisors, I heard how the love within a family, the deepest bonds between a parent and a child, were contorted to inflict unfathomable pain through calculated cruelty and extreme callousness. These acts demand accountability. My office also submits that there are reasonable grounds to believe that hostages taken from Israel have been kept in inhuman conditions and that some have been subject to sexual violence, including rape, while being held in captivity. We have reached that conclusion based on medical records, contemporaneous video, and documentary evidence, and interviews with victims and survivors. My office also continues to investigate reports of sexual violence committed on October 7th. I wish to express my gratitude to the survivors and the families of the victims of the 7th of October attacks for their courage in coming forward to provide their accounts to my office. We remain focused on further deepening our investigations of all crimes committed as part of these attacks and will continue to work with all partners to ensure that justice is delivered. I again reiterate my call for the immediate release of all hostages taken from Israel and for their safe return to their families. This is a fundamental requirement of international humanitarian law. There is no instance in international humanitarian law ever where it's permitted to take hostages. You can have prisoners of war, but never hostage taking. And even soldiers and military people can count as hostages depending on if they were captured as part of a non-military conflict at a particular point in time. Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant. So Benjamin Netanyahu is the current prime minister of Israel, meaning he is the person chosen by the coalition government, meaning the parties that have come together in the Knesset have chosen him to be the head of the country, essentially as the prime minister, right? And then, the true head of the country, some would argue, sometimes for Israel, Yoav Gallant is the Minister of Defense. This is and obviously the IDF and the Prime Minister work very closely. Some people would argue sometimes that the IDF even has more say in what goes on than the Prime Minister themselves, depending on what you're particularly talking about. But these are going to be like your two head honchos, really, when you're talking about Israel committing to any kind of military activity. It is the Prime Minister and then especially the Minister of Defense. And then sometimes you'll also talk about the, I believe it's their Chief of Staff for Israel as well, is the next in command. Ramat Kal. Okay. He doesn't get mentioned much, but all right. Okay. I've heard you say a few times that the IDF sometimes acts as head of state again, instead of the PM. Can you expand on that? I think that the military component of Israel and the political component of Israel oftentimes work very closely with each other. A lot of prime ministers used to be part of the military. And then there are, supposedly, I believe there are times that the IDF can even kind of act independently. I believe this was stated during the 6-Day War. Who was the prime minister? It was Eshkol, I think. We don't have to get into this too deeply, but like there are times where like the IDF will kind of like take the reins, I think, on things. I've heard this accusation. You don't really hear much of it. I don't remember hearing much of Eshkol at all during the 6-Day War. But yeah, the military component of Israel is obviously like a very important part of the government. Yeah. Okay. All right. If you ever wanted to talk about a deep state, you could argue in Israel the IDF is a deep state, but the IDF shouldn't have tried to get their people out. They should have just waited 7 months for Hamas to be indicted by the smug fat man. Don't they look silly now? Okay. Okay. All right. So Benjamin Netanyahu, current prime minister of Israel, has been for like almost 20 years. Not really, 15, 20 years. He was from 96 to 2000. I think he got kicked out, and then or to 99 or whatever. And then Yoav Gallant. I don't know how long he's been minister of defense for. Probably mostly under Netanyahu, but I'm not sure. Okay. On the basis of evidence collected and examined by my office, I have reasonable grounds to believe that Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, and Yoav Gallant, the Minister of Defense of Israel, bear criminal responsibility for the following war crimes and crimes against humanity committed on the territory of the state of Palestine and the Gaza Strip from at least the 8th of October 2023. People say, by the way, just as a quick aside, people will say things like committed war crimes or say crimes against humanity. Technically, People just kind of say these casually, like, oh my God, genocide, crimes against humanity, blah, blah, blah. Technically, anytime somebody, well, at least from the ICC, is invoking these things, these do refer to specific things. So crimes against humanity come under Article 7. Crimes that we consider war crimes come under Article 8. So these will be like, when somebody says crimes against humanity, they're always talking about Article 7 stuff, or, well, technically should be. Or when they're talking about crimes against, what was it? Crimes against humanity and war crimes, they're talking about stuff under Article 8. Okay. So we have starvation of civilians as a method of warfare as a war crime, contrary to Article 8 of the statute. I won't read all the subsections. So this is probably in regards to people talking about the collective punishment of Palestinians by using starvation or whatever. Yeah. Willfully causing great suffering or serious injury to body or health, contrary to Article 8, or cruel treatment as a war crime, contrary to Article 8. Let's see, 8.2a3. I'm guessing this has to do with civilian population, but let's check. 8.2a3. The court shall have jurisdiction with respect to war crimes, particularly when committed as part of a plan or policy, or as part of a large-scale commission of such crimes. For the purposes of this statute, war crimes means grave breaches of the Geneva Conventions of the 12th of August, 1949, namely, any of the following acts against persons or property protected under the provisions of the relevant Geneva Convention. And 3 is willfully causing great suffering or serious injury to body or health. I'm almost for sure this is going to be in relation to civilian populations. We can look at under the elements of, we've got 8.2.3, right? Is what we're talking about? Wait, 8.2a3. 8.2a3. Okay, so elements for this crime. Remember, all 4 elements are required. I'm sorry, hold on, real quick. Do I respond to chat comments? Destiny, the ICC is not talking about the Rome Statute in regard to Israel. Israel is not a signatory. They are only a signatory to Geneva and international common law. Doesn't matter. As long as the ICC has been granted jurisdiction, which it can do through a couple of ways, the ICC can absolutely make charges against people that are not signatories to the Rome Statute. When you say the ICC is not talking about the Rome Statute in regard to Israel, the ICC is authorized and charged with their job via the Rome Statute. Everything they say is going to be in regards to the Rome Statute. That's the only thing the ICC can be talking about. Okay, so 8.2a3 is the perpetrator caused great physical or mental pain or suffering to or serious bodily or serious injury to body or health of one or more persons. Such person or persons were protected under one or more of the Geneva Conventions of 1949. I believe that the Geneva Conventions of 1949 are going to be where you get like concepts, I think, like hors de combat. So basically civilians, I think, or people that shouldn't be targeted by things like civilians or people that aren't basically military people, I believe is overview, protecting the vulnerable in war. IHL, International Humanitarian Law, is a set of rules seeks for humanitarian reasons to limit the effects of armed conflict. IHL protects persons who are not or who are no longer participating in hostilities, and it restricts the means and methods of warfare. So remember, people that can't be targeted in warfare, the term that we use for them is hors de combat. These should be non-targetable people out of action due to injury or damage. I believe that civilians count as well. I don't think that that's just people that are removed from combat. Although now that I'm looking at the word, maybe it was only supposed to be that. Hold on. Hors de combat is a French term. Wait, actually, let's grab this from the IHL site. Hors de combat is a term used in international humanitarian law, which describes a soldier who cannot fight due to being sick, wounded, captured, or incapacitated. These soldiers are not allowed to be attacked or harmed because they pose no threat. I thought this included civilians too. Maybe it's civilians and hors de combat. But okay. Civilians and hors de combat, I guess. Hors de combat versus civilians. Let me just look this up real quick. I don't think there's going to be a difference actually between this. When we talk about international humanitarian law, or when you talk about laws of armed conflict, you have military people that you can target, and then you've got other people that you can't target. Well, really what you have is people that you can target and then everybody else. And all those other people are, I think, more or less treated the same. I say more or less, but I think they're treated exactly the same. You can only target military things and then everybody else is untargetable. I guess technically Orsted combat is referring to removing people who were previously targetable and making them non-targetable. So like soldiers that are injured and stuff. Okay. Sorry, okay. So Orsted combat and civilians would be treated similarly, I guess, but okay. Okay. The perpetrator was aware of the factual circumstances that established protected status. The conduct took place in the context of and was associated with an international armed conflict. The perpetrator was aware of factual circumstances that established the existence of an armed conflict. Okay. I'm guessing this is the war crime. I'm guessing this is referring to civilians is what they're charging here. But they'll probably just talk about it. I'll just keep reading. Sorry. Willfully killing, contrary to Article 2, A1, or murder as a war crime, intentionally directing attacks against a civilian population as a war crime, contrary to Articles 82B1 and 82EI, extermination and or murder, contrary to Articles 71B and 71A, including in the context of deaths caused by starvation as a crime against humanity, persecution as a crime against humanity, contrary to Article 71B, and other inhumane acts as crimes against humanity, contrary to Article 71K. Now, remember that how does it take into account collateral damage? It seems like any collateral can be prosecuted. No, this is what I was just about to say. Remember, for the International Criminal Court, every single crime that's laid out here necessarily has a strong mens rea component to it. So if we look up any one of these crimes, there's going to be something saying that you need to be aware of this or intending to cause it. So for instance, if I look up here, like persecution as a crime against humanity, contrary to, so if we look up the elements of this crime, 71H, and before it doesn't say this, and I'm fucking wrong. JKLMNOP, wait, HI. Oh, so if we look up crime against the humanity or persecution, the perpetrator severely deprived, contrary to international law, one or more persons of fundamental rights. The perpetrator targeted such person or persons by reason of the identity of a group or collectively, or targeted the group or collectivity as such. Such targeting was based on political, racial, national, ethnic, cultural, religious, gender, as defined in Article 7, Paragraph 3, or other grounds that are universally recognized as impermissible under international law. I think that's a Hughes-Kogan's concept. The conduct was committed in connection with any act referred to in Article 7, Paragraph 1. The conduct was committed as part of a widespread or systematic attack directed against the civilian population. And then I think they're usually listed as the last one, the mens rea aspect. The perpetrator knew that the conduct was part of, or intended the conduct to be a part of, a widespread or systematic attack directed against the civilian population. So when the ICC is prosecuting stuff, the ICC is not looking for collateral damage or mistakes. There needs to be an intentionality part. So doing an attack on a building and accidentally killing 500 civilians is not enough. If the ICC is charging a crime, then their thought is, well, no, you did this intentionally and you knew that this was in contravention of international law or something in the Rome Statute, right? Okay. My office submits that the war crimes alleged in these applications were committed in the context of an international armed conflict between Israel and Palestine and a non-international armed conflict between Israel and Hamas, together with other Palestinian armed groups running in parallel. We submit that the crimes against humanity charged were committed as part of a widespread and systematic attack against the Palestinian civilian population pursuant to state policy. These crimes, in our assessment, continue to this day. My office submits the evidence we have collected, including interviews with survivors and eyewitnesses, authenticated video, photo, and audio material, satellite imagery, and statements from the alleged perpetrator group, shows that Israel has intentionally and systematically deprived the civilian population in all parts of Gaza of objects indispensable to human survival. So it's possible, for instance, that we could disagree with what they're saying here, but also it's possible that they have access to evidence that hasn't been made publicly available, or they might think that stuff that they've seen does rise at least to the probable cause needed to issue this arrest warrant. This occurred through the imposition of a total siege over Gaza that involved completely closing the three border crossing points, Rafah, Kerem Shalom, and Eretz, I think, from the 8th of October 2023 for extended periods, and then by arbitrarily restricting the transfer of essential supplies, including food and medicine, through the border crossings after they were reopened. The siege also included cutting off cross-border water pipelines from Israel to Gaza, Gazans' principal source of clean water, for a prolonged period beginning from the 9th of October 2023, and cutting off and hindering electricity supplies from at least 8th of October 2023 until today. This took place alongside other attacks on civilians, including those queuing for food, obstruction of aid delivery by humanitarian agencies, and attacks on and killing of aid workers, which forced many agencies to cease or limit their operations in Gaza. These are very, very, very strong claims that I hope that they've either gathered evidence for or think that they can find evidence of, because unless there's like some really, really, really high thing, maybe we could read earlier in here for things like negligence, the mens rea has to be here, that like you knew that you were killing these people because they were just like civilians queuing for food. It sounds like they're referring to things that we're aware of. So when they say, like, for instance, like killing civilians queuing for food, are they referring to the flour massacre? Obstruction of aid delivery by humanitarian agencies, are they talking about like the border controls? And then attacks on and killing of aid workers, are they talking about the World Kitchen, the WCK attack probably? I'm guessing these are the three events they're referring to, but my office submits that these acts were committed as part of a common plan to use starvation as a method of war and other acts of violence against the Gazan civilian population as a means to, 1, eliminate Hamas, 2, secure the return of the hostages which Hamas has abducted, and 3, collectively punish the civilian population of Gaza, whom they perceived as a threat to Israel. And that Netanyahu specifically ordered it. No? Well, yeah, but remember, it's stronger than that. It can't be, remember, the mens rea aspect here can't be that Netanyahu ordered the attacks to do these things. It's that they ordered the attacks knowing that they were just killing civilians. So for instance, let's say that there was Israeli intelligence that, or they believe that, like, we think that Hamas are operating out of these vehicles, and Netanyahu, I doubt he would be, Yoav Gallant, I don't even know if he's the one personally authorizing it. They say, like, okay, we'll strike that truck, and that truck, and then they blow them up. That's still not enough to consider it a war crime. They would need to know, like, that those are civilians, let's bomb them, let's get them, right? That would be the mens rea aspect that you would need there. The effects of the use of starvation as a method of warfare, together with other attacks and collective punishment against the civilian population of Gaza, are acute, visible, and widely known, and have been confirmed by multiple witnesses interviewed by my office, including local and international medical doctors. They include malnutrition, dehydration, profound suffering, and an increasing number of deaths among the Palestinian population, including babies, other children, and women. He's talking about the effects here. Technically, these aren't relevant to the crime itself because, again, the effects of a thing aren't important. It's the intentionality. But, I mean, you can include these here to show that, like, this is the outcome of a particular crime you're charging. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. Just remember that the effects of a thing aren't related to they don't need to be there for the crime itself, right? Famine is present in some areas of Gaza and is imminent in other areas. As UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned more than 2 months ago, 1.1 million people in Gaza are facing catastrophic hunger, the highest number of people ever recorded anywhere at any time as a result of an entirely man-made disaster. Today, my office seeks to charge 2 of those most responsible, Netanyahu and Gallant, both as co-perpetrators and as superiors, pursuant to Article 25 and Article 28 of the Rome Statute. I think Article 25 and 28, I think, give you the ability to charge people that order crimes. Let me check real quick. As, like, perpetrators themselves. Yes. So Article 28 talks about responsibility of commanders and other superiors. In addition to other grounds of criminal responsibility under this statute for crimes within the jurisdiction of the court, a military commander or person effectively acting as a military commander shall be criminally responsible for crimes within the jurisdiction of the court committed by forces under his or her effective command and control, or effective authority and control as the case may be, as a result of his or her failure to exercise control properly over such forces where that military commander or person either knew or, owing to the circumstances at the time, should have known that the forces were committing or about to commit such crimes, and B, that military commander or person failed to take all necessary and reasonable measures within his or her power to prevent or repress their commission or to submit the matter to the competent authorities for investigation and prosecution. Okay. Somebody said, the standard for an arrest warrant at the ICC is not probable cause, it is reasonable grounds. Reasonable grounds is a lower threshold than probable cause, but the prosecutor has to demonstrate substantial grounds to believe in order to have the charges confirmed and moved into the trial chamber. Substantial grounds is similar, if not higher, than probable cause. Okay. from a chatter. Israel, like all states, has a right to take action to defend its population. That right, however, does not absolve Israel or any other state of its obligation to comply with international humanitarian law, notwithstanding any military goals they may have. The means Israel chose to achieve them in Gaza, namely intentionally causing death, starvation, great suffering, and serious injury to body or health of the civilian population, are criminal. Since last year, in Ramallah, in Cairo, in Israel, and in Rafah, what do we... I don't know why we named these things. Ramallah is a city right into the West Bank, I think, after Jerusalem, where that big Intifada killing happened with the bloody hands. Cairo is our capital of Egypt. I guess he's making statements here. Israel is a country. And then Rafah is a city in Yunis? Wait, is Rafah the name of the city in the Gaza Strip or on the other side? I think it's, it goes Khan Yunis and then Rafah, right? Or is it, wait, let me check, hold on. Rafah. Is it just called the Rafah crossing point? Wait, is the southernmost city Khan Yunis, or is this just called the crossing point? Let me check, hold on. Exodus from Rafah. Is it Palestinian city? It is. Okay, it is the city, yeah. Okay. We can really quickly, I guess, read what he's said here. Since last year, statement of this prosecutor from Ramallah on the situation in the state of Palestine and Israel. ICC prosecutor was in Ramallah as part of his visit to Israel and the state of Palestine, the first by an ICC prosecutor. On the 2nd of December, he issued the video message from Ramallah. Below is a transcript of his remarks. Today is the end of my first trip to the state of Palestine. That's an interesting statement, but okay. I'm here in Ramallah. It's been a productive day, a long day, in which I've met the president, His Excellency Mahmoud Abbas, the Prime Minister, the Minister of Justice, the Minister of Health, and the Minister of Prisons. I've had an opportunity to engage with victims and heard their accounts. Their suffering, both from Gaza and from the West Bank. Pain is real. The loss is acute. And I really feel it's a privilege to have had this opportunity to speak with them. I've also spoken to Palestinian television, and I've given interviews to newspapers. My message has been clear. This is an active investigation. It's an investigation that is a priority for my office, and we're moving forward at pace with rigor, with determination, and with an insistence that we act not on emotion, but on solid evidence. Yesterday, I met Israeli survivors, Israeli family members that have endured so much loss, the horrors of hostage-taking, and the insecurity of the unknown about where they are and what has happened. And today I've also spoken to individuals that have lost their families, loved ones, children, wives, parents in the rubble of Gaza. I've made it crystal clear the law is not some cosmetic adornment that can be disregarded. It's a fundamental requirement that must be complied with. I emphasized again that humanitarian assistance must be allowed in at pace, at scale in Gaza. I emphasized settler violence is unacceptable. I emphasized the commonality of loss between any parent when they've lost a loved one. We need to build partnerships. We need to trust of the Palestinian community. In the same way, we need to trust the Israeli community and those that have suffered in October. Okay, so that's this statement. On December 2nd, 2023, and then we've got in Cairo on October 30th. Oh, this is on December 2nd. Why does he list his statements out of order? Cringe. I come to Egypt at what everybody knows is a very precarious time in world affairs. It's a moment when conflict, once again, stories and accounts I've heard. It's a time like this, I've said, since I became prosecutor, that we need law more than ever. When I became a prosecutor in June of 2021, I served for the first time a dedicated team to investigate the Palestine situation. And for the last 2 years, as I've been calling, requesting, pleading for additional resources, I have been steadily increasing the resource and personnel for the Palestine investigation. We have watched with horror the pictures emerging from Israel on the 7th of October, and we can't watch videos of innocent Israelis being hunted down on a Saturday morning at a party and not pause to think for a moment the hatred and cruelty that underpin these attacks. As I stated, 5 days after the attacks took place in October, we have jurisdiction over crimes committed by the nationals of state parties, and therefore the jurisdiction continues over any Rome Statute crimes committed by Palestinian nationals. While Israel is not a member of the ICC, I stand ready to work with state parties and non-state parties alike in pursuit of accountability. Lady Justice is blind. I thought Lady Justice was for America. Do these guys have Lady Justice too? It's a Roman thing? Fuck off. Rome? Rome was the predecessor to the United States of America. The fact that innocent civilians are trapped under the weight of war, they cannot escape. There's no blank check. There are no children of lesser God. There are no children of a lesser God. When the Holy Quran states that to kill one innocent is as if one is killing all of humanity, it doesn't mention Muslim or non-Muslim. Rather, it says to kill one innocent is to kill all humanity, to save one innocent, not an innocent of this religion or that religion, an innocent of this nationality or that nationality, but to save one innocent, to save all of humanity. In this regard, I have to say that Israel has clear obligations in relation to its war with Hamas. Israel has a professional and well-trained military. They have, I know, military advocate generals and a system, blah, blah, blah. They need to demonstrate the proper application of principles of war. My office will scrutinize. Call upon state parties to the ICC and the non-state parties to help effectively vindicate the Geneva Conventions. Additionally, call upon civil society organizations around the world. I want to be clear, my office in the business of conducting credible, relevant, professional investigations. Saw humanitarian aid truck stuck. Okay, then we have the conclusion of this visit to Israel, where he also made his statements in Ramallah. He talks about visiting the kibbutzes. I call for the immediate unconditional release of all hostages. Okay, this is just retreading what he said before. Okay.
These are the most tragic of days. I have just come from the border of the Rafah crossing. I'm now just on the outside of the compound, and we could see Gaza. At least we could see cranes that were on the territory of Gaza. We couldn't go any closer. I very much hope to be able to enter Gaza and also going to Israel on this particular mission. The suffering of children and women and men, old and young, is profound, and it is ongoing. As the Secretary General of the United Nations has said, as the head of OCHA has said, Martin Griffiths, as the head of the World Health Organization has said, there's a dire humanitarian situation developing. That we have active investigations ongoing in relation to the crimes allegedly committed in Israel on the 7th of October, and also in relation to Gaza and the West Bank and our jurisdiction going back to 2014. This is a moment of objectivity, it's a moment of quiet reflection, and it needs to be a moment in which the international community and the international architecture built on the rubble of the Second World War, the terrible gas chambers and the Holocaust, the razing of cities throughout Europe, was meant to create institutions that would ensure never again would we see abominations where people could be targeted because of their race, their religion, their culture, where they come from, or what passport they hold. Those promises need to be fulfilled. We're independently looking at the situation in Palestine. We're looking at the events in Israel and the allegations that Palestinian nationals have also committed crimes. We need cooperation, we need assistance, but we're going to have the determination, the stamina, and the professionalism to make sure we separate allegation from fact, that we can look at the evidence, investigate incriminating and exonerating evidence equally, and most fundamentally, at this moment, underline the fact that there should not be any impediment to humanitarian relief supplies going to children, to women and men, civilians. They are innocent. They have rights under international humanitarian law. These rights are part of customary international law. These rights are part of the Geneva Conventions, and they give rise to even criminal responsibility when these rights are curtailed under the Rome Statute. This must be a moment where we share our humanity. Jew, Muslim, Gentile, Christian, atheist, find the common ground together to think of children, civilians. They are part of us. We are part of them. And we need to make sure the law is on the front lines, and the law is seen to ameliorate the suffering of so many at this moment who are living in terror, who are frightened, and have a right to be protected by the institutions built after the Second World War, and are equally entitled to the protection of international law. And my office is determined to make sure we vindicate those rights wherever possible and wherever we have jurisdiction.
Okay. Since last year, in Ramallah, in Cairo, in Israel, and in Rafah, I have consistently emphasized that international humanitarian law demands that Israel take urgent action to immediately allow access to humanitarian aid in Gaza at scale. I specifically underline that starvation is a method of war and the denial of humanitarian relief constitute Rome Statute offenses. I could not have been clearer. This is like the equivalent, I guess, of like a cease and desist. where he's like, you better clean this shit up or I'm coming for you. People keep posting this and I don't know what the fuck it means. What is this like? What anime is this from? What you got against Toby Fox? Isn't that the guy that did Undertale? What would I have against him? I specifically underline that starvation is a method of war and the denial of humanitarian relief constitute Rome Statute offenses. I could not have been clearer. That was Toby Keith? Shut the fuck up. Aisieki pretty much means regular person died and reborn into anime world. You're too old, don't worry about it. Okay. Jesus. Hold on. I streamed way too much yesterday. I fucked my shit up, but that's okay. Let's take a quick hate watch break. Hassan was talking about the N-word. No, shut the fuck up. Okay. Where were we? As I have also repeatedly underlined in my public statements, those who do not comply with the law should not complain later when my office takes action. That day has come. In presenting these applications for arrest warrants, my office is acting pursuant to its mandate under the Rome Statute. On February 5th, 2021, Pretrial Chamber 1 decided that the court can exercise its criminal jurisdiction in the situation of the state of Palestine, and that the territorial scope of this jurisdiction extends to Gaza and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. This mandate is ongoing and includes the escalation of hostilities and violence since October 7th, 2023. My office also has jurisdiction over crimes committed by nationals of state parties and by the nationals of non-state parties on the territory of a state party. So this is basically saying that, like, because because the state of Palestine, and I guess the Palestinian Authority, the PLO, requested that they are now signatories and be treated as members of the International Criminal Court of the Rome Statute, that means that crimes committed against them by people that aren't signatories to the ICC or the Rome Statute can now be prosecuted, is essentially where the jurisdiction is coming from. Today's applications are the outcome of an independent and impartial investigation by my office. Guided by our obligation to investigate incriminating and exonerating evidence equally, my office has worked painstakingly to separate claims from facts and to soberly present conclusions based on evidence to the pretrial chamber. As an additional safeguard, I have also been grateful for the advice of a panel of experts in international law, an impartial group I convened to support the evidence, review, and legal analysis in relation to these arrest warrant applications. Report of the panel of experts in international law. 13 pages. I'm going to read this. Panel of experts in international law convened with the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. Report of the panel of experts in international law. These are the members, academic experts, 20th of May, 2024. So this was published at the same time as this statement, which was, 12 hours ago or something? Or 20 hours ago? Introduction. A panel of experts in international law was convened at the request of the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court in support of his investigation into the situation of the state of Palestine, which covers international crimes committed either on the territory of Palestine or by a Palestinian national. The panel's mandate was to advise the prosecutor on whether his applications for arrest warrants met the standard provided in Article 58 of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. Okay, so Article 58 is what gives you the standards of evidence required, I guess, to bring charges. I haven't read the entire Rome Statute, but at any time after the initiation of an investigation, the pretrial chamber shall, on the application of the prosecutor, issue a warrant of arrest of a person if, having examined the application and the evidence or other information submitted by the prosecutor, it is satisfied that there are reasonable grounds to believe that the person has committed a crime within the jurisdiction of the court, and the arrest of the person appears necessary to ensure the person's appearance at trial, to ensure that the person does not obstruct or endanger the investigation or the court proceedings, or, where applicable, to prevent the person from continuing with the commission of that crime or a related crime which is within the jurisdiction of the court and which arises out of the same circumstances. Okay. Specifically, the panel has been asked to provide an opinion on whether there are reasonable grounds to believe that the persons named in the warrants have committed crimes within the jurisdiction of the court. The panel of experts was composed of the following lawyers: Lord Justice Fulford, retired Lord Justice of Appeal and former Vice President of the Court of Appeal of England and Wales, former judge of the International Criminal Court; Judge Theodora Miron, former judge and president of the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. This is the one that I referenced all the time that people talk about for genocide, and special advisor to the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. Amal Clooney, barrister, adjunct professor at Columbia Law School, co-founder of the Clooney Foundation for Justice and special advisor to the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. Danny Friedman, KC, King's Counsel, barrister, expert in criminal law, international law, and human rights. Baroness Helena Kennedy, LT, Lieutenant, I don't know, King's Counsel, barrister, member of the House of Lords, and director of the International Bar Association, Human Rights Institute. Elizabeth Wilmhurst, King's Counsel, former deputy legal advisor at the United Kingdom Foreign and Commonwealth Office, distinguished fellow of international law at Chatham House? I don't fucking know. And then it's been supported by two academic advisors, Professor Marko Milanovic? Is this Milanovic? Professor of Public International Law at the University of Reading School of Law, and Professor Sandesh Sivakumaran, Professor of International Law at the University of Cambridge. It's pronounced Chatham House. Okay. The full biographies of the panel members and academic advisors are set out in the annex. Wait, why? It feels like it's really over-selected from the United Kingdom. Why? Is it just because that's where this guy's from and he... Is there a reason for that? But I don't know. The panel members and the academic advisors were selected because of their expertise in public international law, international human rights law, and international humanitarian law, and international criminal law, and, in the case of two of them, experience as former judges of international criminal tribunals. The panel was convened at the request of the prosecutor in January 2024, and each panel member was asked to assess objectively the material provided to them by the prosecutor and to advise the prosecutor whether it meets the relevant legal tests. Since that time, the panel has been engaged in an extensive process of review and analysis. Panel members carefully reviewed each of the applications for arrest warrants, as well as underlying evidence, including witness statements, expert. The panel is operated pro bono and independently. It has unanimously reached all the views contained in this report. It will set out its key reasoning below, but notes that it cannot disclose any material that is currently confidential. Wow, Gaston, thanks for the 50 memberships, my dude. Jurisdiction. The panel agrees with the prosecutor's assessment of the ICC's jurisdiction in relation to crimes committed on the territory of Palestine, including Gaza, since the 13th of June 2014, under Article 12.2a of the ICC statute. It also agrees that the court has jurisdiction over crimes committed by Palestinian nationals inside or outside Palestinian territory under Article 12.2b of the statute. The ICC therefore has jurisdiction over Israeli, Palestinian, or other nationals who committed crimes in Gaza or the West Bank. It also has jurisdiction over Palestinian nationals who committed crimes on the territory of Israel, even though Israel is not an ICC state party. Remember, if you're a signatory to the ICC and you commit crimes in other countries that aren't signatories, you can still be held responsible. And if people who aren't signatories to the ICC, to the Rome Statute, come and commit crimes in your territory, then you can hold them responsible, even if they're not signatories. Yeah. The basis for the court's jurisdiction is that Palestine, including Gaza, is a state for the purpose of the ICC statute. The ICC's pretrial chamber has already ruled that the court's jurisdiction extends to Palestine as a state party to the ICC statute on this basis. Crimes and applicable law. The applications for arrest warrants charge war crimes and crimes against humanity for both Hamas and Israeli suspects. The panel is aware that additional crimes are under investigation and expected to lead to additional applications in the future. War crimes require a nexus to an armed conflict, and for some war crimes, this conflict must be international. For this reason, it is necessary to assess the situation in Gaza and in Israel to determine whether an armed conflict exists, and if so, its nature. The panel agrees with the prosecutor's conclusion that the conflicts in Israel and Gaza comprise an international armed conflict and a non-international armed conflict running in parallel. Hamas is a highly organized, non-state armed group, and the hostilities between Hamas and Israel have been sufficiently intense to reach the threshold of a non-international armed conflict. The panel's assessment is that the non-international armed conflict between Hamas and Israel began at the latest on the 7th of October 2023 when Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups launched Operation Al-Aqsa Flood against Israel, and Israel launched its Operations Iron Swords in response. The panel has also concluded that there is an international armed conflict between Israel and Palestine on the basis either that Palestine is a state in accordance with the criteria set out in international law, for which there is sufficiently strong argument for the purpose of an application to the court for an arrest warrant, and an international armed conflict arises if a state uses force against a non-state actor on the territory of another state without the latter's consent. Palestine and Israel are both high contracting parties to the 1949 Geneva Conventions, and that pursuant to the text of Common Article 2 of the Conventions, an armed conflict between two high contracting parties is international in character, or there is a belligerent occupation by Israel of at least some Palestinian territory. So only one of these, it needs to be met, I guess, for them to say they have jurisdiction. I'm just seeing if there's anything important here that we need. Let's see. I think his statement here is going to be summarizing what a lot of this is saying. Jesus. Oh, hi.
Hey.
Wow, thanks. Is this a salad?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, everything in here is going to be unanimous. So all of the experts, all of the judges, and the lead prosecutor, every statement in here, I'm guessing there's not like a dissenting opinion or anything for any of this. Thank you, Mr. Calling. Yeah, I should be a war crimer. Thanks.
Have a good one.
Be careful. Biographies of the panel members. And then this is more information on the people. These are fake, right? They wear these wigs. It's like their uniforms. Christ. Do you think if I was an internationally recognized, like critically acclaimed human rights lawyer that had like served multiple terms in international courts, do you think they would still use that stupid fucking picture of me? This one or this one? Okay. Is your audio outputting twice? You're about to get banned for fucking with your own settings and asking me an audio question. Lorgan Jaya, thanks for the 10 gifted memberships. I think that's George Clooney's wife, Amal Clooney. Wait, what? No way. Jesus. Oh. Jesus. It is George Clooney's wife. Crazy. How is it convincing the layman that there needs to be intent in mens rea? Give me a real convincing take. What do you ask? I don't know what that sentence means. How is it convincing the layman that there needs to be intent in mens rea? Give me a real convincing take. Are you missing like a verb here? It makes perfect sense, man. I feel like you type that every time I have... Okay. Anyway. Anyway. That was the... Okay. An impartial group I convened to support the evidence review and legal analysis in relation to these arrest warrant applications. The panel is composed of experts of immense standing in international humanitarian law and international criminal law, including Sir Adrian Fulford, PC, former Lord Justice of Appeal and former International Criminal Court Judge. Baron, okay, we already do this again. On His Excellency. Today, we once again underlined that international law and the laws of armed conflict apply to all. No foot soldier, no commander, no civilian leader. No one can act with impunity. Nothing can justify willfully depriving human beings, including so many women and children, the basic necessities required for life. Nothing can justify the taking of hostages or the targeting of civilians. The independent judges of the International Criminal Court are the sole arbiters as to whether the necessary standards for the issuance of warrants to arrest have been met. Should they grant my applications and issue the requested warrants, I will then work closely with the registrar in all efforts to apprehend the named individuals. I count on all state parties to the Rome Statute to take these applications and the subsequent judicial decision with the same seriousness they have shown in other situations, meeting their obligations under the statute. I also stand ready to work with non-state parties in our common pursuit of accountability. Oh, I just mean that the average layman doesn't care about intent. They just think people lie and that otherwise intent can't really be proved or something. Would you just start trying to show them intent can be proved? People always get angry with you over this. I mean, I just point to criminal court. In the United States, every single criminal act, well, and except for strict liability, but basically 99% of criminal action requires a criminal state of mind. You have to have intent. If you trip over somebody and you trip into them with a knife and you stab them, that's not murder, right? You don't get charged for murder for that. But it is critical in this moment that my office and all parts of the court, including its independent judges, are permitted to conduct their work with full independence and impartiality. I insist that all attempts to impede, intimidate, or improperly influence the officials of this court must cease immediately. My office will not hesitate to act pursuant to Article 70 of the Rome Statute if such conduct continues. I remain deeply concerned about ongoing allegations and emerging evidence of international crimes occurring in Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank. Our investigation continues. My office is advancing multiple and interconnected additional lines of inquiry, including concerning reports of sexual violence during the October 7th attacks and in relation to the large-scale bombings that has caused and continue to cause so many civilian deaths, injuries, and suffering in Gaza. I encourage those with relevant information to contact my office and to submit information via OTP link. My office will not hesitate to submit further applications for warrants of arrest if and when we consider that the threshold of a realistic prospect of conviction has been met. I renew my call for all parties in the current conflict to comply with the law now. I also wish to emphasize that the principle of complementarity, which is at the heart of the Rome Statute, will continue to be assessed by my office as we take action in relation to the above-listed alleged crimes and alleged perpetrators and move forward with other lines of inquiry. Complementarity, however, requires a deferral to national authorities only when they engage in independent and impartial judicial processes that do not shield suspects and are not sham. It requires thorough investigations at all levels addressing the policies and actions underlying these applications. I don't know if this is okay. So I don't have the jurisprudence or the background to know how these normally go, but I believe that this is almost kind of an offer of a way out. So my understanding is that the International Criminal Court, part of the way that you can enforce things that the International Criminal Court might say are illegal is through your own courts. So let's say, for instance, the ICC is looking at you and they're like, I think there are some fucking war crimes going on here. There's definitely some war crimes. Let's say that in your country, you're like, yeah, we know, we've arrested this guy, he's going through our court system now, we're making a good faith effort to prosecute him. If that prosecutorial process is happening in that country, then the ICC doesn't need to pursue anything further. I believe that this is what they mean when they talk about principle of complementarity, that as long as your own courts are holding your own citizens accountable for more, if they're holding your citizens accountable for what the ICC would otherwise prosecute, the ICC doesn't look into it, I believe. Complementarity. The ICC is intended to complement, not to replace, national criminal systems. It prosecutes cases only when states do not or are unwilling. Oh, there should be commas here. It prosecutes cases only when, even they're giving me fucking stroke statements. It prosecutes cases only when states do not, are unwilling, or unable to do so genuinely. So, okay. The statute recognizes that states have the first responsibility and right to prosecute international crimes. The ICC may only exercise jurisdiction where the states are failing to do so or something, right? Where national legal systems fail to do so, including where they purport to act, but in reality are unwilling or unable to genuinely carry out proceedings. Okay. Let us today be clear on one core issue. If we do not demonstrate our willingness to apply the law equally, if it is seen as being applied selectively, we will be creating the conditions for its collapse. In doing so, we will be loosening the remaining bonds that hold us together, the stabilizing connections between all communities and individuals, the safety net to which all victims look in times of suffering. This is the true risk we face in this moment. Now more than ever, we must collectively demonstrate that international humanitarian law, the foundational baseline for human conduct during conflict, applies to all individuals and applies equally across the situations addressed by my office and the court. This is how we will prove tangibly that the lives of all human beings have equal value. Whew. Okay. Real quick, it's a pretty historic thing, I think. ICC arrest warrants. Probably we just need a link to this, huh? Let's see. ICC prosecutor Kareem Khan KC on May 20th. It was May 20th, right? Yes. Issued a statement that he had filed arrest warrants for Yahya Sinwar, Mohammed, Taib, Ibrahim, and Ismail Hanea, as well as Benjamin Netanyahu. Am I spelling his name correctly? And Yoav Gallant for war crimes committed, for breaches of the Rome Statute committed on and after October 7th, 2023. That he had filed, I should say applications for arrest warrants. So you're doing a right of reply to the gurus. Yeah, that's tonight. In 45 minutes. Okay. That's done. So, okay, I don't know if we need to read like a fucking news article of this statement. I feel like Arrest warrant, ICC. Are these warrants a big deal or no? This is just grandstanding. It depends on what you mean by a big deal. Like, is it a big deal in terms of like, is Netanyahu or somebody actually going to be arrested? No. Is it grandstanding? It is kind of grandstanding, but like international opinion and stuff is all about grandstanding. The grandstanding is important because when people go to negotiate deals or when people go to negotiate things, all of these elements or all of these things play a part in those negotiations, basically. Like, if I go to negotiate a final solution for what the border should look like between Israel and Palestine, I can appeal to this and I can say, well, hey, listen, like the ICC literally said you guys committed war crimes against us. That strengthens our argument, right? And then the pressure that allies are going to put on you or the international community are going to put on you to settle things in different ways is going to vary based on like what the international community thinks of you. So you say like, is it actually something happening or is it grandstanding? Like, it is grandstanding, but like the grandstanding is an important part of like how these final arrangements look, basically. Yeah, grandstanding carries with it an implication that it's like nothing is happening. Nothing is happening, but it's an important part of the overall process. So something is happening, if that makes sense. But I don't know if that made sense or not. Hopefully that made sense. Wait. Fuck you. Okay. The United States responds. Warrant applications by the International Criminal Court. Press statement by Antony Blinken, Secretary of State. The United States fundamentally rejects the announcement today from the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court that he is applying for arrest warrants for senior Israeli officials together with warrants for Hamas terrorists. We reject the prosecutor's equivalence of Israel with Hamas. It is shameful. Hamas is a brutal terrorist organization that carried out the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust and is still holding dozens of innocent people hostage, including Americans. Moreover, the United States has been clear since well before the current conflict that the ICC has no jurisdiction over this matter. The ICC was established by its state parties as a court of limited jurisdiction. Those limits are rooted in principles of complementarity, which do not appear to have been applied here, amid the prosecutor's rush to seek those arrest warrants rather than allowing the Israeli legal system a full and timely opportunity to proceed. In other situations, the prosecutor deferred to national investigations and worked with states to allow them time to investigate. The prosecutor did not afford the same opportunity to Israel, which has ongoing investigations and allegations against its personnel. I really wish that they would have said, I wish that he would have given examples here. I don't know if this is true or not. It would be nice to give examples here. There are also deeply, what is the average time for an arrest warrant to be issued after like a crime has supposedly been committed, right? Or allegedly been committed, I should say, right? There are also deeply troubling process questions. Despite not being a member of the court, Israel was prepared to cooperate with the prosecutor. In fact, the prosecutor himself was scheduled to visit Israel as early as next week to discuss the investigation and hear from the Israeli government. The prosecutor's staff was supposed to land in Israel today to coordinate the visit. Israel was informed that they did not board their flight around the same time that the prosecutor went on cable television to announce the charges. Damn! That's a damn! These and other circumstances call into question the legitimacy and credibility of this investigation. If that's true, that's kind of wacky. Fundamentally, this decision does nothing to help and could jeopardize ongoing efforts to reach a ceasefire agreement that would get hostages out and surge humanitarian assistance in, which are the goals of the United States, continues to pursue relentlessly. I agree with this, but this is an argument that needs to be fleshed out quite a bit. The United States published a response rejecting the application for arrest warrants, calling into question the speed at which the prosecutor moved to file charges, to request charges against Israeli leadership. I should probably say Secretary of State. I should probably call him that, right? Antony Blinken. I don't actually have an article for him. Anthony J. Blinken. Do you really need the middle initial? Is that like an important? Do people call him that? Do you agree that the document equates Hamas and Israel? I mean, in a way, I could see you seeing it that way. I mean, I would say probably not really, but maybe it kind of does. I don't know. That's like a political question that I'm not like as concerned with. Somebody in chat, I don't know if this is true or not, but somebody in chat said, for statistics, the ICC has opened proceedings against a total of 54 people in its lifetime of 8,874 allegations. The U.S. will defend Israel no matter what, huh? Probably not. But I mean, we'll defend our allies as much as we can, but I mean, there's going to always be limits, right? Do you think Netanyahu will be prosecuted to the fullest extent, and how will that be carried out? Also, do you think him and Hamas leaders will be treated fairly and accordingly? None of these people are ever going to The Hague. I mean, Netanyahu's not going to fly to a country and get arrested by the ICC. That's not going to happen, right? And then we've got a statement by Lindsey Graham. This outrageous decision is truly a slap in the face to the independent judiciary in Israel, which is renowned for their independence. We must not forget, as a nation, the International Criminal Court threatened to bring action against American forces in Afghanistan, and we are a non-member. I will be issuing a detailed... Well, hold on, that doesn't matter. If Afghanistan is a signatory to the ICC... Afghanistan... fuck, where do I see this? ICC signatories. The states, parties... Okay, Afghanistan. When do they sign? I don't know. Deposited its instrument of ascension to the Rome Statute on the 10th of February, 2003. I don't know when they tried to, what the timeline was for all this, but okay. I'll be issuing a detailed statement regarding the outrageous actions by the ICC against the state of Israel. And I will feverishly work with colleagues on both sides of the aisle in both chambers to levy damning sanctions against the ICC. What does that even look like? Oh, sanctions against the ICC. He probably means sanctioning like the individual members, like the prosecutor and stuff like that. That's not good. You probably don't want that. You shouldn't be trying to interfere with that process that much. I feel like that's wildly inappropriate. That's my feeling on it. However, these are my initial thoughts. Most importantly, I want the world to know that I, along with my Republican and Democrat colleagues and members of the administration, engaged the ICC on this issue weeks ago. We were told there would be discussions with Israel before any actions were taken. We stressed that the principle of complementarity should be applied in this case. Complementarity requires the ICC to let the nation in question's legal system move first before any action is taken by the court. Prosecutor Khan's team was supposed to be in Israel today to arrange a meeting for next week with the prosecutor's office about the allegations. I was told by ICC staff that the investigation would likely take months and not weeks, and that there would be meaningful consultation with the state of Israel. Instead of the ICC following through with the scheduled consultation with Israel, they announced the warrants. I feel that I was lied to and that my colleagues were lied to. Prosecutor Khan is drunk with self-importance and has done a lot of damage to the peace process and to the ability to find a way forward. Lying prosecutors never bring about just outcomes. What is Lindsey Graham's position? Is he on a particular committee that would, why is he the one giving big statements on this? It's also interesting that both the United States, let's see, Anthony Blinken and U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham both claim that the ICC blindsided Israel with the request for arrest warrants on the same day they were supposed to be arranging a visit for the prosecutor to visit and discuss charges with Israel. Interesting. It's kind of memey if that's true. Graham is the Senate Judiciary Committee chair. Do they have unique insight or oversight on something like this, or is he just the one who wanted to make a statement about it? Claimed. They should all be past tense. I feel like for links, I should be using Internet Archives, but I don't know. Is the Hague Invasion Act a meme? I don't think so. If you tried to arrest a U.S. person, I'm pretty sure the U.S. would go to the Hague and extract that person. That'd be my guess. But I'm pretty sure the Hague, no, I don't think that would ever happen. Why shouldn't the U.S. interfere with the investigation? We already have a bill saying the president can invade the Hague if they charge an American, and they obviously don't respect that court. Because, well, but we're not. We're America. I just don't think that if you feel like the process is not working well, or if you disagree with like how they're handling things, trying to intimidate or influence the outcome through sanctions of that court is dramatically undermining the legitimacy of that court. Like, oh, well, because now, let's say hypothetically, let's say that the court is like, actually, we changed our mind. Well, actually, hold on. Right now, keep in mind that what's happened. The prosecutor has filed an application for an arrest warrant. Now, let's say that the judges look at it and the judges go, well, no, we're not going to do an arrest warrant. What if people look now at the court and they go, well, hold on. You're probably just doing that because the United States said they were going to fucking sanction you if you accepted these arrest warrants and you actually issued them, you okayed them. This is bullshit. This court isn't real anymore, right? That would be an issue in terms of like undermining the court, basically. Jump on AP stream. I don't know what the fuck AP is. Let's see what his statements to CNN were. I'm curious.
Prosecutor Kareem Khan, welcome to the program.
Oh, apostate problem.
Thank you for having me.
You are today announcing that you are applying for arrest warrants for top military and political leadership in the Israel-Gaza war since the October 7th events. First and foremost, explain to me exactly what you're asking for and who you are charging.
Today, Christian, we've applied for warrants to the pretrial chamber of the International Criminal Court in relation to 3 individuals that are Hamas members. Sinwar, who's in charge on the ground.
That's Yahya Sinwar?
Absolutely. Dave, who's in charge of the Al-Qassam Brigade, and Hania, who's one of their political bureau based in Doha.
Let me just, for everybody to understand, Yahya Sinwar is the head of what they call the Islamic Resistance Movement, Hamas, the military operation, or even wider. Muhammad Diab Ibrahim al-Masri, otherwise known as Dave, commander-in-chief of the military wings Al-Qassam Brigade, and Ismail Hania, head of the Hamas political bureau. What are the charges?
The charges are extermination, murder, taking of hostages, sexual assault in detention. So these are the key crimes that are alleged to have been committed by these 3 individuals. The world was shocked on the 7th of October when people were ripped from their bedrooms, from their homes, from the different kibbutzim in Israel, and people have suffered enormously, and we have a variety of evidence to support the applications that we've submitted to the judges.
And just tell us what the evidence is. Obviously, the world has seen the real-time images. The Israeli government has put out videos, which it's shared to the UN and others, journalists, about what happened. There are body cams on many of the Hamas fighters, whoever was there at the time. Is that the evidence, or do you have more?
We have more. We have authenticated videos and photographs. We have CCTV camera pictures. We have...
I don't know if they'll make a statement on it, but something that would be interesting is, I wish you would say, do you have information that's not available to us publicly? Now, maybe it's not appropriate for him to say that as a prosecutor. I don't think they have an international obligation, legal obligation to release all the evidence, but it would be nice to know. Like, are you going off of everything that we've all seen, or do you have access to stuff that we haven't seen yet? Destiny, are you still hesitant to believe that Israel is/was deliberately limiting humanitarian aid to non-Hamas Palestinians? I haven't seen any strong evidence of that, and I feel like I've seen too much to the contrary. So no, I don't believe that. But maybe they've got access to other information, or maybe there are statements or information that I don't have access to or haven't seen yet. But
eyewitness evidence, we have evidence of survivors. I mean, it's remarkable. The victims and survivors that have from Israel that have engaged with my office have this righteous demand for justice and accountability. They've come here. I've also met them in the different kibbutzim, and they want justice and accountability. So we have also expert evidence. So there's a whole variety of information that we have authenticated that we think is relevant and probative, and that is sufficient, we say, to sustain the crimes that we put forward to the judges.
You have also issued warrants against the top political and military leadership of the government of the State of Israel.
We've applied for warrants. Of course, the judges must determine whether or not to issue them, but we've applied today. We'll apply for warrants for Prime Minister Netanyahu and also Minister of Defense Gallant for the crimes of causing extermination, causing starvation as a method of war, including the denial of humanitarian relief supplies, deliberately targeting civilians in conflict. And the sad thing really is in relation to both categories. I've been saying repeatedly in Cairo in October last year, at the Rafah crossing, on Israeli television, in Ramallah, everywhere I can, to the parties to the conflict, comply.
So it's not even issued? No. There are no arrest warrants issued yet. This is an application for arrest warrants. The judges haven't approved it yet. This is just an application.
And now don't complain later.
I wonder if she's aware of they were supposed to meet in Israel today and they didn't announce this and instead they went with this public statement. I'm curious what the rationale is for that, or was for that.
Of course, hostages have not been released. That insidious crime, it continues for so many innocent Israelis that are in custody, held hostage by...
Why does that matter? Well, it matters because one of the principles of it's been brought up several times now, but one of the important parts of the International Criminal Court is that they only go after crimes and prosecute people if the state is unwilling or refuses to do so, which is strange because I believe, I don't have the historical worldwide comparison for this, but I believe that the Israeli court system does a decent job at holding itself accountable. So for instance, as an example, that really famous court case about the Israelis using human shields because they would ask somebody to knock on a door before they would do a raid or whatever, the Israeli Supreme Court struck that down. Or the Israeli courts will prosecute sometimes their soldiers or, bar certain leaders from holding office or whatever if they've been involved in things. Generally speaking, now maybe the ICC feels like they don't do it enough or whatever, but the idea that you would come in heavy-handed with an application for these warrants before their courts have even had a chance to sort through stuff, I think is arguably... I'm on very, very, very shallow ground here because I don't know historically what the precedent is, but I think it's arguably that is on shaky ground because the ICC is not supposed to be your first resort for war crimes. The ICC is supposed to be, hey, you're saying that... the ICC is supposed to be you've committed war crimes and your state has no interest in investigating that. You're not even trying to do that. So now we're going to come in and now we're going to investigate, assuming we can prove jurisdiction, right? And I think that's probably the shakiest ground that the ICC is standing on, is that complementary part right now, would be my guess.
Continues for so many innocent Israelis that are in custody.
According to the expert panel that worked with the ICC, many people in Gaza have died of starvation already, although they haven't claimed a number. Do you see evidence for this? I haven't. In fact, I feel like I've seen the opposite. I think there was some international group for children, I think was willing to state up to 27 died of either starvation or disease, was the statement. But then I think the UN completely dropped listing the number of starved people completely from their day-to-day reports, even though they had listed it for over a couple weeks. So I don't know what that means. I don't know why they stopped listing that, if they felt like it wasn't credible or what. It seems weird that only 27 died and nobody else has died since then, or nobody else died at all, for 1 million or for 2 million people if over 1 million are starving. But I don't know. Who knows? All that shit is really fucking wacky and weird to me. But
crime, it continues for so many innocent Israelis that are in custody, held hostage by Hamas and families that are waiting for their return. And of course, we see pictures of starving children, of emaciated children. We have a variety of evidence to support, not polemics, but evidence that's been forensically analysed to sustain the charge also of starvation being used by Netanyahu and Gallant as a method of war. And it's awful that in 2024 we have had to submit these applications to the judges of the ICC for warrants.
I'm going to get into stuff.
I really wish you would talk about the state of mind for that. What do you mean by that? Have you seen statements by them or evidence by them that they intended to wield that as a weapon of war?
Starvation as a weapon of war in a moment. But first I want to ask you, the word genocide has been used by both sides, and many believe that genocide is being committed, but you do not. You're not using that word.
Well, this is an active investigation, and we have criminal charges that we can use: genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. In relation to this current stage of investigations, the charges that we've put forward to the judges do not include genocide, but we are continuing to investigate. It's a very complex situation. We've not been allowed access into Gaza by the Israeli authorities. We're also continuing our investigations in relation to the Hamas attacks, and if and when the evidence points us in a particular direction, we will not hesitate to act. So it's still an active investigation, but yes, today we haven't.
What is extermination?
It's mass killing.
Different than genocide?
Yes. Genocide is defined by specific intent, not only killing.
Oh, that word comes up there. Specific intent.
It's killing.
Different than genocide.
Yes. Genocide is defined by specific intent, not only killing, but an intention to destroy the group in whole or in part. It's a specific intent to destroy the group in whole or in part. So we've not included in that application
No, he means mens rea. He's wrong there.
today a request for warrants for the crime of genocide.
So extermination, war crimes, crimes against humanity. I want to ask you about starvation because although it was accepted by the ICC as a war crime when you were created in 1998, I don't believe it's ever been prosecuted before as a weapon of war.
No, it's not that I'm aware of. I think, unfortunately, this situation will be a first, and it's very unusual. We see a population, large numbers of children and women, that have already endured more than 17 years of a very rigid regime of allowing goods into Gaza. I think even in 2022, the United Nations and others said that 80% of the population, lived on humanitarian supplies. And that's just become even more pernicious since the 8th of October with all the other restrictions. And
I don't think that justified his former statement. Like, there's been a very rigid list of things that have been allowed in, but also 80% of people have survived off of humanitarian supplies. That makes it sound like quite a bit of humanitarian aid is making it in, no? And that, I mean, there are other things wrong with that it shows that the economic conditions are really bad. Maybe he's arguing supplies haven't been allowed in that allow them to build their own economy that would allow them to not rely on humanitarian aid. If I'm being charitable, he could have meant something like that. But
and, the words of the Secretary General of the United Nations, of the head of the Office of Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, Martin Griffiths, WHO, UNICEF, I mean, it seems everybody in the international firmament has spoken with grave concern, extreme concern, but we haven't seen food, water, medicines go to the most vulnerable, and they have those rights, not because of something that I'm saying, it's because it's required in the Geneva Conventions and it's required in the Rome Statute.
So, as of April 17th, according to humanitarian organizations and the authorities, whatever exist on the ground in Gaza, 28 children under 12 have died, including 12 babies about a month old, because of malnutrition-related conditions. The defense...
They did a thing there. That was interesting. Malnutrition-related conditions. That's interesting, right? When they say things like that, my thought is that it's probably some disease that requires some sort of specialized medical care and maybe really heightened consumption of either clean water or food. So things that like have a lot of diarrhea involved, vomiting or whatever, and that people like that might die. Who are usually, I think, the first victims of starvation. But again, always keep in mind the words there, because we're always hearing like imminent famine, imminent starvation, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands are going to die of starvation. And it's like, well, 27 have died from malnutrition-related things, which is, not good. That's bad, and it's horrible. But it's not quite the mass starvation that we've been promised for months and months.
Including 12 babies about a month old because of malnutrition-related conditions. The Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, who today you are issuing an arrest warrant, or the request for an arrest warrant for, said on October 9th, 2 days after October 7th, we are imposing a complete siege. There will be no electricity, no food, no water, no fuel. Everything is closed. We are fighting human animals, and we will act accordingly. Prime Minister Netanyahu on October 13th said, we will exact a price that will be remembered by them and Israel's other enemies for decades to come. Is that the basis on which you establish intent? Or is that part of your evidence?
Much more than that. But yes, some of the words uttered by the two individuals, Minister.
Okay, much more than that. That's good. They should have much more. Somebody said, would you consider it fair to put them in there if the required medical care was just adequate diet and calories? Yeah, I think it's fair to say. I think cholera is like the big one for regions where if you don't have adequate access to clean water and food, people will start dying, which could largely be ameliorated with access to enough food and water. But again, I just wish that people would be careful about the strength of their claims. Remember, one of those news articles we had up was saying that, was it here? That there were going to be more deaths from starvation than airstrikes. Oh, it was this one. This was in December from the Mercy Corps. Gaza deaths from hunger could surpass casualties of airstrikes in coming weeks. Like, these statements have been wild. That's a lot different than 6 months later, children with cholera might have enough access to enough clean water and then they die with cholera, right? But why is it hard for you to believe that Israel is limiting aid to Palestinians when even people in the Biden admin say it's happening, which is why we're building a new port? I feel like the issue has more to do with distribution of aid within the Gaza Strip than the stuff going into the Gaza Strip itself. That's what it feels like to me. People keep making claims. Here's like my issue. This is something that I look for a lot, okay? I think this is a decent thought process to have, but maybe there could be a flaw here. But something that I look for is if a particular thing were happening, what evidence would I expect to see? And if I feel like there's very clear and compelling evidence that I should see and I don't, I count that in my head as evidence that this particular thing probably isn't happening. So, for example, let's say somebody claims to me, hey, what could a claim be? Somebody comes up to me and they say like, hey, okay, do you want Biden or do you want Trump to be president? I go, oh, well, I want Biden to be president. And they're like, okay, well, you should know, you understand, like Biden literally has like an inoperable brain tumor or something, right? And I'm like, wait, what do you mean? And it's like, yeah, everybody knows. It's been like, yeah, like he has an inoperable brain tumor. Like it's known. That's a known thing. If somebody says that to me, the first thing I'm thinking in my mind isn't like, well, fuck, I need to do like better research. I need to figure out like where this is coming from. The thing that's popping in my mind is like, wait, hold on. If Biden had an inoperable brain tumor, I feel like everybody would be talking about this. This would be published everywhere. The fact that this guy seems to be privy to some knowledge that would be sensational, but nobody seems to be talking about it, seems to point in the direction that this is probably not the case. When I look at all of the claims about being, about blocking humanitarian aid and food, and I see these claims brought up over and over again, my mind is thinking like, why hasn't there been one like piece of video evidence of this happening? Why hasn't there been one credible story with a humanitarian aid truck driver somebody interviewed where this claim is being substantiated? Why hasn't there been any investigation that shows like every single time, and we've clicked through some of these docs when people are saying like, oh, this vendor was like, okay, well, where? Let's click, click, click. And we end up on this wild goose chase of like these vague random claims. And it's like, this is some of the most videoed like conflict in the world. There are so many different people involved. We really don't have any video footage or anybody like recording stuff or reporting directly firsthand of like people being told like, you can't bring this humanitarian aid in for XYZ reason for no, like, it seems like I just don't see that anywhere, which like, that makes me wonder, like what's actually going on here. It could be the case that, that it is happening. I haven't seen good evidence for it. And I feel like that would be out there, that everybody would be screaming it from the rooftops. But yeah. Not allowing third-party verification means that the fog of war favors the dominant military power. What about the governing power in the Gaza Strip? Why doesn't Hamas have that video evidence? Why aren't they recording stuff? Why aren't they shipping videos to people? Why aren't they posting stuff online? Why aren't they geosyncing or whatever posting like? Like, they had no problem taking so much footage of them coming in and doing the October 7th shit. Well, why don't I have any video footage of like Israelis like committing like all these insane crimes? Like, it's like, I'll get like 2 or 3 sensational videos and that's it. But if this is like a systematic policy of like stuff going on, I feel like there should be so much more evidence. That's what I feel. But I mean,
It's much more than that. But yes, some of the words uttered by the two individuals, Minister of Defense Gallant and Prime Minister.
Why does Biden admin keep confirming the humanitarian aid issue? Because there is a humanitarian aid issue. We're having problems getting food to people, but that doesn't mean a humanitarian aid issue doesn't mean that it's because Israel is intentionally blocking it to use it as a weapon of war. Right? There's 2 huge parts to that claim. One is that they're intentionally blocking it, which I haven't seen strong evidence of at all. And 2 is that if they were intentionally blocking it, that they're doing it as a weapon of war. Those are 2 separate, very strong claims, neither of which I believe has been justified. It feels like the big issue is distribution of aid on the other side of the wall. Now, it could also be that, well, no, it's not that it could be. Israel has, I believe, an obligation to make sure that Israel has an obligation to make sure that it's distributed once it's inside. But again, it's a fundamentally separate claim. Then they're like intentionally blocking it as a weapon of war. Now, unless maybe there are statements that they found from Israeli leadership saying things like, okay, like get it to the other side so we can blame the UN on this, but we're not going to do shit to get this out. Like, these people are starving, like, fuck them. They're going to take down Hamas. As long as they're hungry enough, Hamas wants to hear about, like, if you had statements like that, okay, well, now you're using the starvation as a weapon of war. That is a war crime by definition. And the mens rea aspect is easily fulfilled there, and all the elements of the crime are easily fulfilled there. Maybe they have access to those statements, and I haven't seen that. That's possible, right? Or maybe those statements are out there and I just haven't looked at them because I'm so biased.
Mr. Netanyahu are, of course, probative and relevant. The fact that so many other individuals have said, words like there's no such thing as an innocent civilian in Gaza.
Isn't it arguable that Israeli politicians are using euphemisms and internal comms, just like how the Nazis did? The comparison to Nazis doesn't really make any sense. Like, when the Nazis were Holocausting people, the Jews couldn't surrender to the Nazis. The Jews couldn't say, okay, well, we're done fighting, we give up, like, please stop now. That was never an option because that was a genocide. There was no option for surrender. And like, when you looked at that, like, there were no notices saying like, hey, Jews, we're going to come and clear you out. So if you guys want, you better leave, you better flee, you better get out of here before we come. Like that, like the situations are just entirely like not comparable at all. So, I mean, there could be like coded comms and stuff. That's possible. But there are so many actions on the ground that seem to contradict that intention, but
they're all responsible. The words by members of the Security Committee. I mean, there's a whole variety of words that are said and done by the government that have not been disowned, that have not been denied, that the two individuals have not disassociated themselves from. And I think that's relevant. But it's a very complex operation. It's not just the denial of aid. It's not only the fact that as an occupying power, Israel has an affirmative obligation to make sure food and the objects indispensable to survival get to the civilians. They have an affirmative obligation. They're in control of the north of Gaza, for example.
I don't know why he brings that up. I'm almost entirely positive that this is not relevant. Whether you're an occupying power or not, you still have an obligation, I believe, to make sure that the civilian population is not dying en masse. Like, I don't think it matters if you're an occupier or not. Like, if you go to war with a country, well, actually, no, wait, that might be incorrect. It might be that your obligation extends there because you're occupying the territory that you take over. But I believe that even against... No, actually, never mind. I think he's right. He's probably going to be right. He's a prosecutor. Never mind. The affirmative obligation to take care of the civilian population might be because you occupy them. I mean, we can look, actually. Affirmative obligation to population, regardless of if he's right or wrong in that regard. He is correct that Israel does have that affirmative obligation. I'm just trying to think of where it comes from. Does it come from you occupying them, or does it come just from the existence of an armed conflict between you? Affirmative action to enemy population. Enemy population, humanitarian... Because now I'm thinking of this in my head, like, what if you bomb a country from afar? Do you have an obligation to make sure that they get humanitarian aid? Probably not, I don't think. Removal of civilian objects from the vicinity of military objectives. No, this is to your own population. IHL rule, humanitarian aid. Let me check. I'm of the opinion that if Biden loses due to single-issue voters on Gaza, those voters forfeit the right to complain about any of the multitude of other issues a second Trump presidency will cause. Am I an asshole? No, you have a right to be a single-issue voter. The parties to the conflict must allow and facilitate rapid and unimpeded passage of humanitarian relief for civilians in need, which is impartial in character and conducted without any adverse distinction subject to their right of control. Okay, so never mind. So he is right. Because Israel is an occupying power, they do have that affirmative obligation to provide. I thought the affirmative obligation was regardless, but I guess it makes sense. You have to be occupying because you can't affirmatively make sure they have the right to have humanitarian aid if you're not even occupying. So.
The fact that as an occupying power, Israel has an affirmative obligation to make sure food and the objects indispensable to survival get to the civilians. They have an affirmative obligation. They're in control of the north of Gaza, for example. IDF tanks are in situ. They could guard aid convoys going in and making sure it goes to the camps. They're not doing that. But in addition, one has to look at a wider aspect. Water has been cut off. Electricity has been, plants have been either destroyed or targeted. Fuel can't go in. Desalination plants are completely dysfunctional. There's no desalination plant.
Destiny knows better than the prosecutor. LOL LeMayo even. I gave my opinion and I looked it up and I was incorrect. That's the difference between me and whatever other retarded content creator you watch that has probably never opened a single one of these documents. He's probably never opened the IHO rule set. He's probably never opened the Rome statute. He's probably never opened the elements of crimes for any of these things in his entire life. But you can go watch them. Good luck. Bye.
And in the north of Gaza at all. Water purification tablets, filtration systems have been classified as dual-use objects, as have incubators, as has oxygen for hospital, as have anesthetics. One sees 90% of all the greenhouses in the north of Gaza destroyed. 40% of the land that was used for agriculture has been destroyed since the conflict started. 70% of the fishing vessels. I mean, every avenue that is so important to human survival has been constrained or suffocated because of a policy. And the words of the Secretary General of the United Nations.
Does Russia count as an occupying power of Ukraine in the parts that they have actively occupied? Yeah.
We said we're at breaking point. The words of UNICEF, the words of UNRWA, saying that we've got a trickle of aid in a sea of need. All of these.
There literally is tons of footage for Israeli war crimes. It's just not being released right now because Israel's been cutting off aid, and the Gaza Strip recently ran out of Sony Vegas Pro free trial codes in the Gaza Strip. Okay.
Giants of the international system, their words, their concerns have been put to one side, unfortunately, in the face of other imperatives and what seems to be a bid also for the collective punishment of the people of Gaza.
What is the international law on the restrictions that you're talking about? And for instance, the checking of aid convoys. The Israeli government says it is at war with a terror organization and has worked in coordination with the US, Egypt, and international aid agencies to get aid in. Netanyahu himself on October 29th, after 2 weeks of nothing getting in, another week later said, we must prevent a humanitarian disaster. What do you make of those words? And what is the law on stopping and checking aid convoys?
See, we have to look at words and analyse them against what is taking place.
Stop in. Netanyahu himself on October 29th, after 2 weeks of nothing getting in, another week later said, we must prevent a humanitarian disaster. What do you make of those words? And what is the law on stopping and checking aid convoys?
See, we have to look at words and analyse them against what is taking place. Prime Minister Netanyahu has been on the record to say that the access of humanitarian aid gives Israel important leeway that is being used. They've talked about a diplomatic iron dome as part of allowing aid in and not allowing aid in and all the rest of it. Israel has every right not to give succor to Hamas. That is not contested. Israel has every right and indeed an obligation to get hostages back. But you must do so by complying with the law. The fact that Hamas...
I'm curious, does anybody have a link to the statements that Netanyahu's made on that? I don't think I've read those directly. I should be familiar with those. Netanyahu... Oh, fuck. I don't even know what I would look up here.
Fighters need water. Doesn't justify denying water from all the civilian population of Gaza. There's an obligation. As I said, it's an affirmative. In addition to everything else, there's an affirmative obligation as an occupying power that Israel is to make sure water, medicines, anesthetics, insulin goes to the people that need it. If tanks can go in, why can't those tanks and those soldiers guard aid convoys? So there's a lot of... that Israel is to make sure water, medicines, anesthetics, insulin goes to the people that need it. If tanks can go in, why can't those tanks and those soldiers guard aid convoys? So
that's an interesting question, because remember, they tried that, and that's where that flower massacre occurred. That when they sent the convoys with the Israeli military behind it, they had a huge issue with that. Now, I don't know if we'll ever know why or what exactly happened there, because I don't know if there's been a detailed report or investigation. But
so there's a lot of deficiencies that give rise not just to recklessness or negligence or indifference, but seems to be part of a criminal common plan to deny these objects indispensable to the survival.
When he says that there seems to be a plan to deny, that can't be based on results. That has to be based on statements or intent that's been found somewhere.
Deficiencies that give rise not just to recklessness or negligence or indifference, but seems to be part of a criminal common plan to deny.
Keep in mind, he is laying out, though, he is saying that, like, it's not like recklessness, it's not whatever, it's like part of it. Remember, because I don't even know if there's like a recklessness or criminal recklessness or whatever for the ICC stuff. I'm not aware of that. There might be, but I'm not aware of that. I think it has to be like intentional. Let me check. We can just control F it real quick. Negligence. No. Negligence or recklessness. No. I don't believe so. For the purpose of this article, this is just for Article 30, a person shall be criminally responsible and liable for punishment for a crime within the jurisdiction of the court only if the material elements are committed with intent and knowledge. For the purpose of this article, a person has intent where, in relation to conduct, the person means to engage in the conduct. In relation to the consequence, a person means to cause that consequence or is aware that it will occur in the ordinary course of events. For the purpose of this article, knowledge means awareness that a circumstance exists or a consequence will occur in the ordinary course of events. Know and knowingly shall be construed accordingly. I don't think carelessness or recklessness or whatever is part of this.
These objects indispensable to the survival of the civilian population. And how many doctors have to talk about amputating the limbs of little babies or children without anesthetic, or how many people need to die without insulin, or how many people with 50% burns can be left by the doctors in the different hospitals because they don't have antibiotic creams for burns and they can't save them without that, for us to realise that the law is being breached. Now, this is what we have analysed, and we've presented it for judges who will make the final decision if warrants should be issued or not.
And again, you say that you have requested these warrants based on a higher level of evidence than is normally required. Not just that there's a reasonable belief that it could lead to actual warrants and a charge, but you believe your evidence has what?
Well, when I came in as prosecutor, the standard for a warrant are reasonable grounds to believe. That's what the judges have to determine. Across all our situations, when I became prosecutor, I required the leaders in the office, the heads of the teams, to certify that there's a realistic prospect of conviction. It's not enough in these kinds of cases to have enough to issue a warrant. We must be able to bring it home.
On both sides?
On both sides. And in relation to both, I've determined, and the team are unanimous, that we have a a realistic prospect of conviction in relation to the 3 warrants being sought regarding the Hamas leaders and the 2 that are being sought in relation to Prime Minister Netanyahu and Foreign Minister Gallant. And of course, the judges will decide if you've got it right and our analysis is spot on or not.
I'm going to get to the actual how you affect these warrants, given the practicalities of the situation in a moment. But first, I want to ask you about the so-called political nature that many people will claim. Prime Minister...
Clarification, I don't believe single-issue voters should actually lose any rights, but I think their opinions on the matter become irrelevant when they've allowed Trump to become president and mess everything up. Maybe, sure. But.
Netanyahu has already said ICC charges would be a scandal on a historic scale, an indelible stain on the idea of justice. Israel's commitment to international law is unwavering. And Netanyahu has also said it would be an anti-Semitic hate crime. Now, we haven't heard anything from Hamas about how they would react.
Pull that anti-Semitism ripcord.
To that, there must have been a huge amount of pressure on you from all sides to do and not to do.
Well, this court, Christian, is a child of Nuremberg.
We're apolitical.
It was built because of the awful pictures that haunt us today of the Shoah and the gas chambers and then the Balkans and the list goes on. And we have to look at the evidence. And the way I very simply try to do things is look at the evidence, look at the conduct, look at the victims, and airbrush out the nationality. And if a crime's been committed, we should move forward. Nobody is above the law. No people by dint of birth or passport,
Did Destiny see Matt talking about him on the Theo Von podcast? Nope.
religion, nationality, or the colour of their skin have a get-out-of-jail-free card, have a free pass to say, well, the law doesn't apply to us. This is a moment when we see in the shadow of Ukraine a increasing cacophony of noise, of double standards and selectivity. And what we're trying to do is not go with a tide of emotion, but take our time, move as effectively as we can, but be guided by evidence. And every human life, every baby that is killed, whether it's a baby that's cruelly abducted by Hamas and killed, or a baby that's been bombed or killed or has died in incubators because of no electricity or water or food in Gaza, for them, for their families and for humanity, it's a tragedy. And this is why we have a court. It's about the equal application of the law. No people are better than another. No people anywhere are saints. And so we have to apply a yardstick of legality to conduct. We've done...
I'm going to assume you check this guy's background and he has a career of anti-Israel stances? I have no idea what the guy's background is. I'm not really that concerned about it. Just look at what's in the statements and then the warrant application, right?
That, and this is why we make the applications that the judges must determine.
I'm going to read you some heavy criticism that you've received from the United States. As we know, the United States is not a party to the ICC, nor is Israel. Recently, when word came out that this may be happening at some point, U.S. senators and U.S. congresspeople, mostly Republicans, wrote you a letter signed by Senator Tom Cotton, Mitch McConnell, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, and others. This is the quote: "Target Israel and we will target you. If you move forward with the measures indicated in the report, we will move to end all American support for the ICC."
Fuck, I'm running out of time for this. Sorry, I'm responding, Charlotte. Why have leftists been saying the Holocaust was a Zionist plan? Is there any legitimacy to this? One of the early Arab myths was that the Jews worked with Hitler in order to create the Holocaust so that it would drive more Jews to Palestine. That's like a very early anti-Israeli or anti-Semitic or anti-Jew or whatever the fuck like myth to explain why that the Jews actually wanted the Holocaust to happen so that they could start sending more people to Israel. Another Arab early myth is that every single act of violence against Jews, especially I think in Baghdad, they claim this in 51, that any of these like terrorist attacks or anything that caused Jews to flee after any of the wars, that those were all done by the Mossad as well. They were done by secret Jews in order to make Jewish people flee these Arab states and go to Israel. I think the closest you get to demonstrating something like that would probably be the Lavon affair in Egypt, but I don't think that ever targeted Jews. I think that just targeted some civilian places at night. But I have to go and read into that really quick.
Hi.
What? Fuck, I've got to do a podcast in like 3 minutes. What's up?
Okay. Recklessness is sufficient for war crimes, not negligence, though. So for the mind state for willful killing of civilians, that recklessness does count. So if you're like, take out this military objective, and they're like, no, too much collateral damage, you're like, fuck it, do it anyway. That's
well, yeah, but I think the way that they talk about that is that if you have the knowledge to know that that's going to be the outcome, then that would be, would you consider that recklessness, I guess? So like in the example that you gave where they're like, if we're going to take out this building, 100 people dying, like, I don't give a fuck, take it out anyway, then you know what's going to happen as a result of the action. So you're
so they distinguish between recklessness and negligence, because if they purposeful attack on civilians, there would be like the difference between recklessness and just targeting a civilian, like even when there's no military objective. Right. Do you
know where that's at in the Rome statute? I was trying to find things on negligence.
It's not really in it. It's like, but it's
jurisprudence based on other.
Yeah. So let me give you the fucking thing. I think they mentioned it in. Hang on, I'll give you 2 links.
The trial for the Yugoslavia stuff.
No, there's the short retarded one that I read, and then there's the one that's in the IHL treaties where they mention recklessness as well. But they define it in this little article from this website. So there you go. You got 3 minutes, though. Bye.
Love you. Convention 2 for the amelioration of the condition of wounded, sick, and shipwrecked members of armed forces at sea is the first thing he linked, and then this is commentary. Control F, recklessness. From the wording of Article 51 itself, 2 important points can be noted and should be implemented in national legislation. These, the term willful indicates, at least for the crimes of killing or causing great suffering or serious injury to body or health, that either intentional or reckless conduct will engage the responsibility of the perpetrator. Citation 63. Uses the term dual eventually for recklessness. Oh, fuck, and this links to another thing. Commentary on the additional protocol. This is probably coming from AP1, what would be my guess? Okay, recklessness might... how do people define recklessness? Equal application, Control F, reckless. Okay, recklessness includes when an attacker consciously disregards a substantial and unjustifiable risk of harm to civilians or civilian objects. Negligence is a lower threshold than recklessness. Negligence includes, for example, when an attacker should have known the probable consequence of their actions was to kill civilians, civilian objects rather than combatants. Okay. Leaving like if members engage. Under the law of armed conflict, a state or non-state group may be legally on the hook if members of its armed forces kill civilians out of negligence, but the individual would not be criminally liable. Okay. Meaning ICJ could say something about ICC wouldn't, I guess. Okay, so recklessness can be the prerequisite mens rea, assuming that you still need the awareness that the action is going to cause something, and then you consciously disregard that awareness, essentially, I guess. Yeah. Okay, fuck me. I'll do the rest of this tomorrow. Am I streaming tomorrow? Yeah, I am.
Sanction your employees and associates and bar you and your families from the United States. You have been warned. Is that a threat?
I think that's the plain meaning of it in English. But, there's hotheads everywhere, and there's people that are mature statesmen and stateswomen and leaders. There are those that have fidelity to something greater than themselves, whether it's their constitutions, but ultimately it's the rule of law. The good news is, I think, for the last 2.5 years, we've had very positive engagement with the Biden administration in the United States. We're working across a range of situations, whether it's in Ukraine or Darfur. And I've said to distinguished members on the Hill and to the administration that Rome Statute values are quintessential American values. It's against bullying. It's against the untrammeled power against the most vulnerable. It's the rights and the dignity of the individual. It's the protection of babies. I mean, these are fundamental American values that should engender bipartisan support. Now, of course, this situation, unfortunately, lies on the San Andreas fault of international politics and strategic interests. And, of course, I've had some elected leaders speak to me and be very blunt. This court is built for Africa and for thugs like Putin, was what one senior leader told me. We don't view it like that. This court is the legacy of Nuremberg. This court is a sad indictment of humanity. This court should be the triumph of law over power and brute force. Grab what you can, take what you want, do what you will. And we're going to simply be, we're not going to be dissuaded by threats or any other activities, because in the end we have to fulfill our responsibilities as prosecutors, as the men and women of the office, as judges, as the registry, to something bigger than ourselves, which is the fidelity to justice. And we're not going to be swayed by the different types of threats, some of which are public and some maybe not.
You mentioned, without names, that there are many who have been indicted who are not in democratic states, who are essentially despots. Israel is a democracy. They have a judiciary, they have law enforcement, they have elected leaders. Okay. Why do you need to do this when they have a system that could do this?
I'm not sure.
That's an important question for the complementarian principle.
The judiciary, they have law enforcement, they have elected leaders. Why do you need to do this when they have a system that could do this?
Also, I'm sorry, real quick, I'm sorry. He is right too. The ICC and the ICJ are important because after every huge thing, what would basically happen is that like, okay, well, we've got to convene a special council, we've got to convene the fucking Nuremberg, we got to convene this and that and that. These are supposed to give us a permanent setting to explore these issues rather than having to convene an independent, unique tribunal every single time something fucking happens, basically, yeah.
The judiciary, they have law enforcement, they have elected leaders. Why do you need to do this when they have a system that could do this?
I'd much rather Israel does it. I mean, Israel, you're right, it has a very good Supreme Court, it has very qualified, brilliant lawyers, but even if you read recently public information, for example, in the New York Times, I think the Bergman and Massali report, if one goes back to the 80s and look at the Karp report, a Deputy Attorney General of Israel who said that Israel was unwilling and unable to investigate crimes in the occupied territories, if one looks at the Sassoon report, if one looks at General, US three-star general that was in Washington, D.C. Between 2019 and 2021, who said there's no accountability, the simple truth is that for all the application of the law in the territory of Israel, unfortunately, it doesn't appear to be applied with vigor or sincerity in the occupied territories or in Gaza, and this is why we have to move forward. Of course, if Israel disagrees, if they think they are investigating the same individuals and the same conduct and the policies that underpin them, they are free, notwithstanding their objections to jurisdiction, to raise a challenge before the judges of the court. And that's what I advise them to do. But the simple truth of the matter is the disregard of the law in this situation and the policies and the utterances that are coming from the Prime Minister, the Minister of Defence, support and corroborate the other evidence we have from a variety of sources.
It has been cool to watch your career over the past 3 years. Super glad to see the podcast and push into more mainstream conversations going well. Hope to see the media company stuff you've been touching on do the same. Thanks, H, for the $100.
I just want to fill in for our viewers. You mentioned in big New York Times Magazine report this weekend by Ronan Bergman and Mark Mazzetti, an 8-year effort. It was titled Unpunished, and as you say, it is about the failure of the Israeli system, police, legal, and military to punish settlers on the occupied West Bank as they punish Arab Palestinians on the West Bank. Now, you talk about the state of Palestine, and therefore you have jurisdiction over things that happen in the occupied West Bank and Gaza. There are those who disagree with you. Clearly, Israel disagrees. The United States disagrees. They point out that as yet there is no official state of Palestine recognized by the Security Council. What is your jurisdiction there?
Well, it's a jurisdiction that's detailed in the statute and that has been decided by majority by the pre-trial chamber. Leaving aside to for the moment the fact that 141 countries have recognized Palestine as a state.
In the General
Assembly, 124 states that make up the Assembly of State Parties agreed for Palestine to be accepted as a state party to the Rome Statute. And so, by dint of that, clearly we have jurisdiction. The Geneva Conventions also make it clear that it applies to high contracting parties. Israel is a high contracting party, as is Palestine.
What does that mean?
It means that they have both committed to comply with the provisions of the Geneva Conventions. That includes the prohibition on starvation as a method of war. That includes the prohibition on taking hostages or willfully killing or extermination. I mean, these come from the Rome Statute. But originally they found form in the Geneva Conventions. So we apply the law. There's been judicial pronouncements by the ICC, and we have to be guided by those.
The Hamas leaders who you have sought arrest warrants for, do you have any hope that anybody will move against them? Do you have any hope of ever getting to them? Again, the ICC does not have a police force. You cannot go and apprehend. As far as we know, at least 2 of them are underground, potentially in tunnels in Gaza. And Ismail Haniyeh appears to be the leader involved in the political negotiations indirect between Israel and Hamas, with the US, Qatar, other nations mediating. How do you expect to go after them? Who do you think is going to hand them over?
Well, the first thing is for judges to rule on the applications. Until the judges rule on the application, all it is an application that doesn't have legal effect. But then states have certain responsibilities and individuals have choices.
Jesus, Super Quiet, thanks for the $100. Jeepers, Super Quiet, donate 100 right now. Brokey ass Jeepers.
Individuals say that what's alleged is not made out, it's bunkum, it's nonsense. Put your case before the independent judges of the court. This court has had acquittals, this court has not confirmed cases. The record shows that it's a forensic laboratory in which the evidence determines whether or not people are convicted, cases are confirmed, or cases are kicked out. That applies to Hamas leaders if they want, and if not, we have to see what are the other opportunities. If they're either in Palestine, which is a state party, or if they're in Qatar, which is a non-state party. But in a way, that's getting ahead of ourselves. Today, the announcement is the application, and the judges have to be given the time to independently and dispassionately assess what we've given. Nothing is a given. They have to assess it and make a determination whether or not to issue warrants. But I also wanted to underline the fact that you mentioned in an earlier question the allegations of anti-Semitism, the hate, the idea that by applying the law blindly, we are favouring one side or persecuting or being hostile to another side, and nothing can be further from the truth. We have so many people of distinction that are respected. And they independently came in. I brought them in. They sat in the evidence review. This is not a witch hunt. This is not some kind of emotional reaction to noise. We've been criticised for going too slowly, criticised for going too fast. It's a forensic process that is expected of us as international prosecutors, as an independent court, to build evidence that is solid, that will not dissolve in the courtroom. And that's what we've done. Today is the fulfilment of that first stage, this first round of applications in which we say we have done our job. We now give it to the judges to scrutinise. So it's not against any people, and it's not against or for any interest. It's simply because if we don't apply the law equally, we're going to disintegrate as a species. Of course, what's happening in the West Bank is extremely worrying. It's an issue also that we are investigating. But there's a certain... In democracies, political choices tend to be determinative. And all I can say is that Israel, the leaders, the country, has a choice. That they can engage and do what is necessary to meet complementarity in the United Kingdom. In the Iraq investigations, before I was appointed prosecutor, it was found that there were deficiencies in the legal system for military justice. But we have really sincerely looked at things with a broad horizon, looking at incriminating and exonerating evidence equally, looking at evidence, authenticating the evidence, and realizing that we're not worth the job, the title as being a prosecutor, or being lawyers, or having an international criminal court, if we are dissuaded because of extraneous interests from moving forward. Because at the end of the day, I go back to this basic premise. A child in Myanmar that's persecuted, or a child in Israel that is an orphan or that has been taken and killed, or one in Ukraine, for their family, there's no difference. Their universe has been torn to shreds. And this is the need for the court and independent judges to scrutinise, not look at the politics, not look at a dysfunctional Security Council, not look at the difficulties it may cause, regional organisations or different...
Did you say dysfunctional Security Council?
...groupings, but simply say, is the evidence reliable? And if so, we go back to King John. That the king is under no man but God and the law. We all must be subject to that. Otherwise, what is this international rules-based system? What is the principles of public international law that so many men and women have given their lives for since the Second World War, particularly? And I think it's a dishonour for them. It's a dishonour for the victims of the gas chambers if we airbrush out inconvenient truths, and we have to try our best to achieve justice for the victims of the 7th of October. We also must try our best to do justice for so many innocent people that are suffering as we speak in Israel and also in Gaza, as well as in other parts of Palestine.
Prosecutor Kareem Khan, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Cool, wow. Well, or, I mean, not cool, I guess, but